Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale. And we're recording late this week, well, just because we were waiting for some news. And now on Thursday night, well, we got some earlier today, Shane. Before we get into anything else, Azuolas Tubelis has declared for the NBA draft, and sources say his return to Arizona isn't looking good. Before we get into anything else, just your thoughts on that announcement from Tubelis. Is it the right decision on his part?
If he wants to play in the NBA, I'd say yes. I don't know how much of a difference coming back for another season would make at this point. I don't know, like on an individual level, how much left he has to prove or how much more he's going to improve. I don't know if he's a great fit in the NBA for reasons that our guests have talked about. But if he wants to play pro ball, if that's his goal, then so be it. Whether it's in the NBA or if he doesn't get drafted, if he gets picked up by a team and to see how he does in the summer league, or if he decides to go, he can obviously go play pro overseas and make a decent amount of money as well. So not a surprise. And like I mentioned on Twitter earlier, the Sean Miller era, for lack of a better term, is officially over now, because it's all Tommy Lloyd's guys going forward, except for I'm assuming Tubelis' brother is going to follow him out of town, and he didn't play anyway. So Kreese is gone, Tubelis is gone. It's Tommy Lloyd's team now, and for better or worse, that's what it looks like going forward. And the other piece of positive news there is that Tubelis made a decision pretty early on. Unlike Dalen Terry last year, I know Koloko and Mathurin declared pretty early, but Terry kind of left some things hanging there. With Tubelis presumably gone for good from Arizona, that'll allow Tommy Lloyd to scour the transfer portal and hopefully pick up someone who's worthy of filling his shoes next season, or at least close to it.
I think, honestly, Shane, I'm grateful for the 3 years that Azuolas gave us, but I think this is a big mistake. I don't see him as an NBA player, number one.
Yeah.
Number two, I think he's the type of guy that stays for another year and has like a Tyler Hansbrough-like impact as a senior.
Yeah.
Like, lead your team to the promised land. I mean, what's the best case scenario for him in the NBA? A second-round pick with a non-guaranteed contract, whereas I think he could have gotten some serious NIL money at Arizona.
Maybe.
And led this team, which, assuming we'll find out maybe some Ryan Nembhard news next week as he's visiting Arizona this weekend, as well as Gonzaga. Cats seem to be in the driver's seat. I just think this is a mistake. I don't understand it. You didn't win Pac-12 Player of the Year. Your defense is lacking. I mean, the offense is losing him is a big deal. But defensively, he was not good. That's not going to go well in the NBA.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I don't think we disagree, Eric. I mean, for Arizona, it's a big loss. There's no.
But for him, it's the wrong decision, in my opinion.
I just don't know how.
I wish him well.
Yeah,
I do.
Well, and the thing with Tubelis is, I don't know if it's an international thing or what. I never saw a fire from him like we saw from a guy, say, like Ben Mathurin, or Dalen Terry, and I don't know how much of a difference that makes. And it would be a moot point if Arizona had made it far in the tournament. But in a way, it kind of feels like a clean slate now that this is all going to be Tommy Lloyd's team, completely Tommy Lloyd's team, for better or for worse. I know he'd argue that it already was, and technically it certainly was, but it's going to be his roster going forward, and I'm excited, a little nervous to see what that's going to look like, but I'm very intrigued to see what's going to happen in the next few weeks. And like I said, at least we know, and at least Arizona can move ahead accordingly in the transfer portal and in the high school recruiting scene.
So we'll talk more about that here in Buy or Sell, and then we're going to do a little football conversation with our buddy Barrett Baker, who has not been on with us in quite a while. Really looking forward to catching up with him as he had a chance to catch some of the spring practices. Shane and I, unfortunately, will not be at the spring game this weekend, but we will have one of the captains of the spring game, Chris Gronkowski, on with us next week to break everything down. So best of luck to both Gronkowski brothers, Chris and Rob, for their contributions this weekend. All right, Shane, it's time for Buy or Sell, and it's brought to you by Chris Gronkowski's company of Ice Shaker.
Great segue.
There you go. Thank you. Go to iceshaker.com. You can get one of these beauties that Shane is drinking out of right now, or you can see behind my shoulder here. You can go, as I said, iceshaker.com. Use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C. Get $5 off, or you can go buy one at fanatics.com. All right, Shane. Number one, the transfer portal in college sports is out of control and must be curbed. Buy or sell?
I'll buy it for just to keep it simple, but to go a little more in depth. I believe what I think a lot of people believe at this point, which is let them transfer for free once, and then after that, it's going to cost you a little bit. As in, it's going to cost you a year of not a year of eligibility. But you have to sit out a year.
Yes, unless there's a coaching change. Then
right.
I understand it.
I agree with that. I agree with that, or some sort of family hardship, whatever. I also I've been thinking about the idea that if you commit to a university, you commit to play for a school, you should have to go there at least 2 years. And again, unless there's a coaching change or some sort of hardship, you have to make some sort of commitment. I understand there's going to be NIL money, and look, the transfer portal and NIL both came together at the same time and just created this mass chaos. It's like when two big storms connect and make a big, super thunderstorm, whatever. Horrible analogy, but you get what I'm trying to say. It's like everything kind of went chaotic all at once with the NIL money, and now guys are chasing that. They have the chance to chase that in the transfer portal now. Was it like 20% of D1 players are now in the portal? That's insane. And look, if guys think that another school is a better fit, a chance to make more money now, which is maybe the biggest element of it, that's fine. But I think that, look, you get one freebie, and after that, you have to sit out a year. Unless there's some sort of hardship or coaching change, like we said. And again, I kind of like the idea of you have to play 2 years at a school that you can.
I'm all with you. I'm with you there. This transfer portal is out of control. This is an easy buy. There needs to be a salary cap of sorts for NIL money. You gotta level the playing field somewhat. And I agree with your idea about one transfer barring hardship. And stay for 2 years, unless there's a coaching change or whatnot. I think it is just so bad. I mean, originally it was grad transfers, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And then it's just gotten stupid. And I've had enough of it. And it's making college sports worse. It's free agency is fun in the NFL and NBA and MLB, but it's stupid in college. It really is.
Well, it's the thing, like in pro sports, you can't just hop from one team to another every year. No. If you sign a 3 or 4 year contract, you can't just opt out of it. You could try to sit out and get more money, but and if you sign a year-to-year contract, that's one thing. But you signed a scholarship to play a certain amount of years, and I know guys go pro early, and that's fine. That hasn't changed. That's nothing new. But why should you be able to get out of something in the college level that you wouldn't be able to get out of at the pro level?
1A, Shane, top players are signing, but Arizona hasn't done anything yet. Are you concerned? Buy or sell?
No, I'll sell. I'm not concerned yet. I think Tommy Lloyd's got some options. I was a little underwhelmed what they did last year. Cedric Henderson and Courtney Ramey, they were good additions, but I think they kind of performed like we thought they would. They were good contributors, had some great games. They weren't superstars. Ramey shot in against UCLA in the Pac-12 tournament championship game was huge. So I'm not discounting that, but they weren't superstars per se. And again, I think Dalen Terry's decision, his late decision to enter the draft, kind of hampered things. And a lot of guys who might otherwise have come to Arizona be like, okay, is this Dalen guy going to come back next year? Do I have to play behind him? Is it going to cost me a chance for some NIL deals? So again, the fact that it looks like as of now, we know who's gone and we know who's coming back there, unless there are any other surprises. And there's a lot of spots open. So I'm not concerned yet. Ask me again in a month and the situation doesn't look much better, and then I would be. But there's as we just talked about, there's a lot of guys in there right now, and they're obviously focused on Ryan Nembhard. I'm sure there's some other guys behind the scenes we don't know about. So not concerned yet. It's very early in the process. I'm going to start with this. Let's revisit this question next week after the likely Nembhard decision. Yeah. He seems to be an Arizona lean based on what I've read. If the Wildcats lose him to Gonzaga, this is a big problem, and then we can start talking. So for now, I'm not concerned. I'll panic next week if given the opportunity. 1B, Shane, Adia Barnes pickups aren't really as eye-catching as they have been in previous years. Are you concerned about those, or are you buying the concern or selling the concern? I'll buy the concern a little bit. Yeah, it's interesting that the pieces that she's added have been, they've been bit players on lesser teams. So there's that concern. Adia Barnes tweeted about a week or so ago something that we discussed with her when she was on the show, is that she tweeted something to the effect of, NIL is the most important thing in the transfer portal. And I think that was maybe a subtweet of some of her experience. I'm picturing her going up and trying to get some top players to come to Tucson, selling her on the program and the culture and the chance to go to the WNBA and all that stuff. And the first question I bet she's getting a lot is, okay, how much money can I make here? And I think that puts her off a little bit. I think that maybe, I'm not saying she hasn't embraced it and doesn't appreciate the opportunity that student athletes have to make money, but I think she's maybe become a little disheartened. Just the way I interpreted that tweet, maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe she's come a little disheartened at just how important that is. And maybe Arizona still, they can't quite compete with other schools in that regard, at least for on the women's basketball side of things. So I think that's part of it. There was a tweet the other day that with her, kind of a cryptic one with her and Maya Nagy, that suggested maybe they're going to get a Big Ten player, or maybe they're in play for one, and things can change every day. But yeah, underwhelmed so far. They got a great recruiting class coming in, but considering what they've lost, they maybe even have more holes to fill than the men's side does.
Yeah, I'm concerned, and I would like to have Adia on hopefully in the next 6 weeks or so. We can ask her about this and just kind of get her.
And she'll be blunt with us too.
Yeah,
that.
And that's why I like having her on, because we can ask her honest questions and she'll answer honestly with us. She's no BS.
She doesn't do the coach speak.
No, and that's what we like about her. Though we have concerns. Number 2, Shane, at this point, there is no possible way that the Pac-12 can make a good TV deal happen.
I guess you never say never, but I will buy that it's very, very unlikely. I mean, if we're looking at the CW, I mean, they're going to be featured before or after Live Golf. That's not the ideal situation. I mean, that's almost a joke. It really is.
It's a disaster. It really is. Yeah, it's a disaster.
It's bad. It seems like the only viable option they have would be, streaming only, which again, for a certain portion of the population just isn't going to fly. And yeah, like I said, Eric, I'm on the Big 12 train with you. Hopefully that happens. It doesn't sound like a TV. And the deadline is kind of what, June 1st?
No, it's before then. But here's what I got in the last week. I heard down the line that by June 1st, if there's no definitive Pac-12 TV deal that I think, or that I've heard, that Arizona will be among the teams that jumps to the Big 12. Mm-hmm. I mean, take it with a grain of salt. I think that's a reasonable timetable. I would probably have said that had I not heard it. We'll see what happens. But I think right now what we've seen, this has been a total disaster. And I'm sorry, but I can't see any possible way that the Pac-12 as it stands now, or the Pac-10, comes out smelling like roses. No pun intended. Yeah. I mean, you add San Diego State. What value does that really add? Great, they got to the championship game in a fluky year in the NCAA tournament. Does that really do anything? Not really.
It's all about football, as we talked about. So yeah, and San Diego State's got a decent football team, but it's not. They don't have the pedigree of a USC or UCLA. It's apples and oranges. And then who else are you going to add? SMU doesn't move the needle. Yeah, I think that it's. I try not to be too knee jerky about these things, but this has gone on long enough. Arizona needs to find greener pastures.
Yeah, and I just don't understand the hesitation. Like, what do you like? If you're a Pac-12 president and athletic director at this point, you've seen that things are not working. Like, you're probably not getting a great deal because one hasn't come along yet. It's not like Fox is just going to immediately change their minds. Oh my God, we really want this conference. They've had 9 months to talk about this, and nothing's happened. And therefore, it leads into question number 3, Shane. It's fair to say that George Kliavkoff has actually been worse than Larry Scott as Pac-12 commissioner by yourself.
It's really tough for me to answer this one. But I will sell just because I don't know if there's anything that anyone could have done at this point. I don't know if there's a miracle worker out there who could, unless I don't think there's like a Shark Tank investor that could have come along and fixed the Pac-12 at this point. I think Kliavkoff was faced really with an impossible task that, I don't think it was his fault that USC and UCLA bolted. I think that was in the works and during the Larry Scott era. So I think that's unfair to him. I don't know if he could have done more. I mean, the only thing he's really done and has been able to do is promote a confident, I'll call it facade to the public, and saying that, we're really in much better shape than we really are. But I think privately, if he were to talk to you off the record, he'd say, I inherited just a complete dumpster fire, and there's nothing that anyone could have done to fix things with Larry Scott.
Here's where I disagree, and here's why might somewhat by this question. What has he done? Like, he seems like a nice guy. He's a better figurehead for the conference than Larry Scott was. We know that. But, like, what has he done, Shane? Nothing. Like, legitimately, you look at Brett Yormark in the Big 12. He went out and proactively got a TV deal done. What has George Kliavkoff done? He's had 9 months to do anything with a TV deal and got nothing. The best he came up with is CW or, streaming only. It's garbage.
Yeah, and Kliavkoff, I think, was kind of a Hail Mary, and because he doesn't really come from the sports world, he comes from the entertainment world. But you think that the two might kind of, it would make sense. And I actually thought it kind of made sense at the time. You need something different, sort of outside the box to jolt the conference. But I think maybe we were just a little too far down the line at this point for him to do anything. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, no, he hasn't done much. Could he have done more? I don't know.
I think so. I think so. I think you got to be proactive. I would not have waited, and without knowing I'll be honest, don't know the circumstances. Yeah. I would have been proactive in trying to get a deal done before the Big 12 did. And and number two, you shouldn't have been blindsided by USC and UCLA. You shouldn't have. You know that teams are going to move. Like the ACC commissioner, I know they have a grant of rights or whatever that's called over there, but Miami wants to move. Florida State wants to get out of there. I'm sure Jim Phillips, I believe that's his name, I'm sure he's aware of it. George, you had to know something wasn't right with those schools. And in that respect, if Larry Scott probably would have known because he had built those relationships to clear. Larry probably got out for a reason. He probably knew what was coming down the line. Yeah. He's like, I don't want to be blamed for this. I've already done enough. My career will be over if I'm still here when they leave.
What's the line? Even rats know when to jump ship.
Larry Scott knew when to jump ship.
Yep.
A guy that we totally transitioning in not a good segue. We have a guy that we love having on the show, and we want to talk spring football. And I probably will ask him about Big 12 and Pac-12 as well, just because, I love asking that question. But it's time to talk to Barrett Baker, who we haven't had on in 5 months, and find out his thoughts on the 2023 Arizona football team here in spring practice on Wildcat Country.
What's up, Wildcat Country? It's Robbie G, baby, and I am gearing up for a big year with Coach Jedd Fisch and excited to see what the Arizona Wildcats do this football season. And just like the football team, we stepped up our program as well with the official licensed U of A Ice Shaker, baby. Check it out and get it at fanatics.com. Bear down, Arizona. Let's go.
Shane, one of our favorite football guests that we haven't had on in a long time because we haven't, as you said before the show, we haven't talked football in a long time.
Been all basketball up until now.
He's a man that I can say is significantly braver than I will ever be in life, and that's Barrett Baker, who was a former special teams captain, and he's now, I believe, a battalion chief. Did I get it right this time, Barrett? Did I get it right or no?
We're semantics, Eric. It's deputy chief officially, but you know what? It doesn't matter.
I never get it
Fire
right.
Department. Tucson Fire Department. Let's just go with that.
I'm going to stick with it. Much braver than I ever would be, I ever will be and have been and whatnot. Barrett, great to have you. My first question, when you see Bill Belichick out at Arizona practice, if you were Jedd Fisch, what do you like take a picture of that and put it on your wall? Do you use that in recruiting pitches? Like, explain the significance to current players and to recruits in your opinion.
Who doesn't know Bill Belichick? I mean, and when you talk about Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, you're kind of putting the Mount Rushmore of coaches out there. So to see him have an impact and be in Tucson, Arizona, for a University of Arizona practice and just be involved in the program at all, that just it speaks volumes as to where we're going about winning football. And to your point, I went out to practice 3 weeks ago, and I'm starstruck as I'm talking with Brian Billick and Mike Smith and the coaches clinic. And I thought, again, as a football junkie, and you guys are included in that, it's just unreal to actually talk to an NFL head coach that won a Super Bowl and be able to ask him about certain things and get that perspective. So it's just valuable. And I think when you see them come out to the practice, listen, these are 18, 19, 20, 20-year-old kids that have the want and the desire to get to that level. So if you got the real guy standing right there, it's pretty awesome.
Barrett, did Dick Tomey do anything comparable to that when you were there?
He would just bring in. Let's give you an example. Edwin Moses. Now, I'm dating myself, but Edwin Moses, right, greatest hurdler that existed there, and to bring somebody like that in and winning at an Olympic level, because the NFL special, NBA special. When you talk about Olympic athletes at a worldwide level to come in and talk to you, that had an impact, and I think that's kind of what he did. Is it wasn't necessarily football related all the time, but he would bring in people from different genres, different perspectives, and say, how do you survive in life? How do you succeed in life? Not just football. And that's why he was so special as well.
Kind of along the lines of Jed bringing Steve Kerr back to talk to the guys, even though it's a different sport. Obviously, he's had a lot of success in his particular sport. So, in between putting out fires, Barrett, I know you've had a little time to take in Arizona football practice. Just your overall impressions of the team so far.
I mean, where we were 3 years ago compared to where we are today is certainly more than 3 years in how a program either gets better or gets worse. Because we saw the inverse of that, and we saw how fast things went downhill. It's harder to build it back up. But, without sounding too cliche-ish, you have to build the foundation. And that doesn't happen overnight, but you have to change the mentality, and you have to bring people in that know how to win. And it requires a little bit of patience, and we're not patient as a society, as a fan base, and that's not to blame anyone. But we are on the right track. And if you're close to the program, then you know that. Now, the wins and the losses, that's how ultimately everyone is judged. But we're going up, and those wins are going to come. And you can feel it, you can see it when you're around there. And I'm excited for the road ahead here. It's absolutely different. That starts with the coaching staff. And then the players have bought into that. And when football's fun, then it's just a whole different ordeal. When it's not fun, it's a grind. And we're back to the fun part. And when you're fun, you can give 100% because that's what it takes to win.
You sent me a message about a month or so ago, maybe not even that long ago, just telling me a little bit, kind of an overview of what positions you thought look good, and then maybe some concerns. Just you mentioned maybe one or two positions you think that team looks solid in, maybe even better than last year, and then maybe one or two that might concern you going into the next season.
I think the tight end position, when you look at that, that has 3 or 4 guys, and I talked to Coach Pow, excuse me. You get a surprise there. Last year, not anybody in the planet knew who Tanner McLaughlin was, correct? And now we're talking about an NFL kid. But in spring, he was still getting healthy and recovering from his knee surgery, and he was the newcomer. And now everyone's saying Gronk Jr. So there is so much that can happen between spring and fall of next year. But that tight end group between Tanner, obviously Burnett is still growing. Miranda is healthy and physically looks the part. And then a lot of folks, without spilling inside information, but there's a lot of people that are talking about number 87, and that is our tight end from Brophy, that he has the highest ceiling out of all of them potentially. So when you talk about a kid that's like 6'7" and 245 pounds, and whose best days are ahead of him, then that's scary as well. So 4 tight ends, the running back position, obviously. Wiley was on fire last year, one of the top backs in the nation at the end of the season. But I would not want to tackle Jonah Coleman. His legs are bigger than my waist, and he runs with an aggressiveness and looks like just a really different back this year. And then DJ Williams, he's a little bit nicked up, or has been nicked up, but another guy that, as a defensive back, you really don't like to tackle people like that run with a meanness to them, a physicality. So those 3 guys right there, but you need 3 guys, as we saw last year, because with running backs, you get beat up. It's a physical position. So I think those 2 position groups are obviously right there. The wide receiver group, we had 3 of the best in the Pac-10 or the Pac-12, much less the
no, you got it right. You got it right.
Pac-10. Yeah. But we lost a big piece. So now who's that person that's going to come in and fill that role? And we'll see how that goes. But I mean, you obviously have 2 players there that are proven commodities. Now we just need to get that 3rd, 4th, 5th kid to step up and really contribute. But, Jordan Morgan, going to the offensive line real quick, he's an NFL draft pick. And so when you have NFL draft picks, that's how you win in college football as well. So for him to be on schedule, I wouldn't say ahead of schedule because I don't know that, but as long as he's not behind schedule, then obviously he's going to have a big impact. but who's that tackle that's going to take over and hold things down? And I think that's why spring is really important to kind of establish that depth. You look at Borjan from last year, junior college kid. There's a transition there. I was a junior college kid, so I understand what that means. But his body has changed, and just finding the right fit and moving Jonah, as we know, from right guard to right tackle. I think that's an insurance policy, depending on how some of the young kids come in and compete. But I just rambled through the offense, but I left out the quarterback position because everyone would be happy with that. And I think that, the progression and how you get better in an offense with time, obviously there's a huge comfort level, and we're expecting big things from Jaden as well.
So Barrett, you mentioned NFL talent. So I told Shane this a few months ago on the sports books that Justin Flo was actually listed as one of the candidates to go number 1 overall. Now, I don't know who put him in there. Now, obviously, he then transferred to Arizona. But this is a kid with legitimate NFL talent. Then they brought in a guy named Bill Norton from Georgia. Just tell us your impressions of what you saw on defense and how much better you expect this defense to be in year 2 under Johnny Nansen.
I'm going to start with somebody that you didn't mention there that I have a tremendous bias towards. But the addition of Dwayne Akina, it can't really be spoken about how big that is. And when you go to practice and you see and hear Coach Akina coach and have the impact on a defense that he does with his controlled insanity, that is the starting point. And I mean, I loved it. And when I went out there at one point, he said, "Do you miss it, Barrett?" He's got that raspy voice. And I told him I could give him one play. But I love the fact that our defensive guys get to be coached by him. And that's not a shot at our other coaches, but he's different. And when you put the amount of guys in the NFL that he's had, he makes defenses better with his knowledge, with his scheme, with his ability to communicate, with his ability to motivate. So from a coaching standpoint, that will be a huge deal. Player standpoint, when I went out there, it's a little tough to tell how big Bill is going to do, right? Because he is a giant person in the middle of a defense, and it's hard to be impactful when you're just watching practice. But when you see him in a game, and can he control the gaps up front, control the center, plug up the guard, all of those holes that you expect from those big guys, Tyler Manoa. So they have actual size, and I guess I would say that Bill and Manoa, they have size. Now, size isn't everything, and I know that sounds lame, but we've had size in the past. Fish Fanene, Sione. I mean, we've had some kids in the past that have had the size, but not necessarily that productivity. So we need them to be productive, not just big. But coming from a Georgia, that's a big deal. Manoa is familiar with Coach Nansen, and they obviously brought him in for a reason. So those two guys up front, that keeps your linebackers clean. Clean linebackers are effective linebackers, right? When centers and guards and tackles get to the next level and they reach those linebackers, that's when you get big plays against the defense, and we don't want that. So Flo, I'll choose my words carefully, because I think potential is an extremely dangerous word, because rarely do we live up to it. And I think with him, the concern from me is that if you're not being a full-time starter at Oregon under a very proven defensive coach in Dan Lanning, what was missing? And it's easy to point to the injuries. But last year, if he's healthy and he's not playing, that scares me a little bit. So I'm in a wait and see. And when I see that, I mean, this kid's got like a physique like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he's a violent hitter. So I don't think that you can discount that portion. But do what the defense asks you to do. And that's not tackle every single ball carrier. It's not intercept every pass. It's literally do what your assignment is. So if he can do that, there's an unmatched ceiling there with his physical skills, as long as he can stay healthy. But, Hemuli's another kid that came in from Washington. Again, why didn't he contribute as much at Washington? I don't know, but maybe the change of scenery helps him out. And then I think one of the biggest, without jumping ahead on you guys, but Patu, the Cal transfer as a defensive end, that's where defense starts, is up front. You have to be able to pressure a quarterback, and you really, if you can do that out of your base defense, now you're really ahead, because now you use your back seven to cover, right? But I think Hunter Echols last year gave us a little bit of a pass rush, but we have to replace that. And Patu looks the part. I mean, he's long. He's 6'5" and 240 pounds, but he only had 2 sacks in his career at Cal out of 4 years. They see something in him. That's why they brought him in. That's not an accident. But that kid has to be able to contribute from the defensive end position, and you got to get the development from the young defensive ends in Davis, Ward, and both Deuces for that matter.
I'll tell you, your knowledge of the roster in spring. Usually, I wait till my Phil Steele magazine comes out with all the players listed. You just ran down offense and defense. It was super impressive. So I'm going to give you one here, just kind of a generic question. The last time we had you on was after the UCLA game, and we were all excited because Arizona pulled the upset, and then they flopped against Washington State, but they beat ASU. That was great. You look at the schedule for next year. Do you see 6 wins on that schedule or more to get Arizona to a bowl game?
I see 7, and that's if things go the right way. And sometimes, football is luck, and a lot of the breaks have to go your way with staying healthy. When Jordan Morgan left, or when he got hurt against UCLA, that was a huge difference because Sam Lange, he's not Jordan Morgan. He's a good football player, but he's not that first round draft pick that Jordan was. So that, it takes health and luck and execution. So, I think that there's 7 wins there, and then you just keep building, and you never really know where things start. And just a quick story: in 1997, we were a good football team, but something was missing, and I don't know what it was. But we had lost to Ohio State, we lost to UCLA, and Coach really challenged us. And then we went to Washington State against their Rose Bowl team that year, and we lost in overtime. And I've told that story before, but the locker room changed after that game. Because at that time you could only travel 60 players, but there was 60 guys that knew we should have won that game. And we ended up winning out the rest of the season, knocking ASU out of their Fiesta Bowl. And that paved the way into the next year. So when does that moment happen for us, as in the current squad? And maybe it's going to Mississippi State early in the season and knocking them off, because we competed against them last year. And I believe they lost Will Rogers, their quarterback. So, why not go in and compete against them? And so maybe you sneak that one, which no one's really expecting you to win. And now all of a sudden the guys say, this is why we worked so hard. And now it's just week to week, and you start getting those wins. So I believe in it. And I think there's no reason offensively, especially, that, we're going to be good on offense. I'm still scared about the defense, but hopefully they make me eat my words and just, light it up. And if we can get balanced football, you always have a good chance to win some games.
Barrett, my only concern about Jaden DeLora, because I love his game, is he's a very emotional guy. And I think that could be sometimes a good thing, but if you let it get the best of you sometimes, which I think maybe he did sometimes, it could be a detriment. I think back to his scrap with Dorian Singer, and you could see him getting emotional on his sideline sometimes. I don't know if you had a chance to talk to him personally or just observe from afar, but is that a concern of yours or no?
I think that's Coach Fish's concern. I think that he's been upfront about that. And that's something that the chemistry between those two working together, going through a whole nother spring, getting comfortable in it. And I think that's what he said, right? There's no such thing as a 14-point play in football. And so you live to fight another day. And that's just the maturity. And I mean, we saw the best of him, and I think he's been obviously a huge addition to the program. But those intangibles that you talk about, and I don't think I would get in trouble by saying this, but I did ask Brian Billick, because he was standing next to me, so I'm going to take advantage of that. But I said, when you come out here to a practice and you look at number 7 out there, can you see that he's an NFL kid? And he said, without hesitation, he's got an NFL arm. But there's a lot more that goes into it. And we chatted briefly about the quarterback position is nothing more than a 50-50 flip of the coin as to whether they succeed in the NFL, because it's everything else besides the arm. Right? It's making the right read. It's getting into the right play. It's executing. It's about 6 different things. And does DeLora have the ability? Because we know the arm is there, but can he get better at the other 5? If I can say that. So I'm expecting him to get better. And again, the more weapons you have, and when Wiley and Coleman and Williams run effectively, then that is a huge deal as well for any quarterback, because when they're taking away or trying to take away the run, now you got one-on-ones, and that's a lot easier for quarterbacks to have success with.
And you get running backs who can catch the ball too, which can definitely bail you out in situations if you're willing to let them, which is kind of the other element of that. I got two more for you, Barrett, and I had no purpose in asking you this. It just came to my mind because Peyton Manning mentioned a few months ago that the whole idea of halftime adjustments are a myth. They don't really happen. True or false?
I would say true. And it's hydrate. It's calm down a little bit. It's your position coach coming in and having one or two very, very specific adjustments that you possibly might make. And then it's listening to your defensive coordinator or your offensive coordinator. So listen, you scouted out a whole week and you have a game plan. You cannot throw that out and throw some new defense that you never practiced or anything like that, or an offensive play that you haven't run since the first week of the season when it's week 8. It's just not realistic. So execute and find out. I mean, what does he say in training day? The blank is not chess, it's checkers. Flip that though. It ain't checkers, it's chess, right? Find out what they're hurting you with and how do you counter that. And so I would agree with Peyton that it wasn't wholesale changes. It's what are the little tiny things, and if they've picked up on any tendencies in that first half that they feel like they can take away in the second half.
Which you do throughout the game anyway, right? You evaluate each possession.
And to that point, the challenge with us, we had Coach Ellerson. He was our defensive coordinator. He was in the box because he had defensive coaches like Akina on the sideline that could make those adjustments on the whiteboard. So every time your unit comes off, you see everybody go to the bench. They stay with their position group and they have their coach come over and talk about things. And I can't speak to the offensive line, but they have to figure out what the defense is doing with their stunts and their moves and all of that stuff. We have to figure out formation wise, are they doing motions that are confusing us and getting us out of the defense that we want to be? So it's not major things, it's little things, but little things make a big difference every time.
All right, my last question for you, Barrett. And we know that a former member of the Wildcat Country podcast, or former guest, I should say, Keola Antolin, U of A alum, joined the fire squad down in Tucson. We talked a little bit before we started recording, but just tell us about his position and how that all came about.
Keola's he's a great kid. And I'll say kid because I'm older than him, and I don't mean it disrespectfully, but Keola went up to the CFL, tried to play football up there for a few years, but just, injuries are tough. It's a tough part of football. So he eventually had to kind of move away from that. He went back to Las Vegas and was involved in coaching for a while. And but there was something else that he felt was out there for him. And so somehow we got hooked up and talked about the fire department. And he has a family that, I think his wife's a nurse, and he's got a brother that's in law enforcement. So he comes from kind of a family that gives back a little bit, and just started working with him when he was still living in Las Vegas, and a few phone conversations and this and that. And he just did an exceptional job of putting in as much work as possible to get through our application process. He got hired. He finished up the 22-week training academy, and now he's working at Station 9 for us, which is by Park Mall, and really just doing well. Just great family, really a good individual, and we're a better city because of the fact that he's given back a little bit. So a great success story, very excited for his career. And, now we're looking for the next Keola to join the fire department as well. So
that is really high praise from you to give Keola. That's really, really cool. Shane, we'll have to have him on again and play that clip from Barrett.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's really cool to say. And I'm sure that would mean a lot to him. All right. My last question, it's cliche, but we haven't had you on in 5 months. So I have to ask you, are you team Pac-10 or team Big 12 for Arizona going forward?
Is that I can't even answer that. Look at me, I'm speechless. I don't care. I just love watching football, and I want Arizona football to win wherever we go. I think the Big 12, that's a new thing. That there's obviously something that's attractive about that. The traditional part of me, I love playing the other 10 teams, and those are where the rivalries are at, and that's where I'm comfortable. And so that's the frustrating part about today's football. If I could be long-winded, right? It's all about the dollars and it's all about the TV and the exposure. But I just love going to football games at Arizona Stadium and kicking off at 6 or 7 o'clock and cheering for the Wildcats. And I think I have a better opportunity to do that, obviously, when we stay in the pack, because those road games, that's a whole different animal, right? But I'm impartial. I just love watching the U of A, and I hope wherever it is that we end up kicking butt in either conference and coming out with some sort of championship.
We have a lot of football guests on throughout the year, or we've had, and doing almost 150 shows. But Barrett, I'll tell you, you're one of Shane's and my favorites because of your passion and your expertise. We always appreciate having you on. Can't believe it's been 5 months, but I guarantee you that we'll have you on sooner than the next 5 months. So thank you so much for joining us here on this show.
Always a pleasure, guys. Bear down, and let's support the Cats for spring football, and then let's see how it goes. Excited for it.
One Gem Mint PSA 10 after another. That's what so many card collectors, including yours truly, have experienced when they submit their cards for grading through DT Sports Cards. They are an authorized PSA dealer, which means if you submit your cards through them, you'll reap all the benefits of being a PSA subscriber without actually having to subscribe. That means you can take advantage of PSA's bulk submission rate, even if you want to submit just a single card. And for just $2 a card, DT Sports Cards will give your cards a thorough review and tell you if they're likely to receive your desired grades for them. I've submitted baseball, football, basketball, hockey, and yes, even Pokemon, and have received so many PSA 10s because DT Sports Cards has helped me send in the right cards and save my money on the rest. Check them out for yourself at dtsportscards.com or on Twitter and Instagram at DT_sportscards.
Great stuff from Barrett Baker. Great to talk to him. Just great info. I'm just using the word great a lot because every time we have Barrett on, you learn something new, and he really went down the roster and did a great job, Shane. So great to get the info. That's 4 times in 30 seconds. But I've said it. He's great.
It was great. It was great that you mentioned it. Yeah. No, it just made me think during the conversation we had with Barrett, and by the way, when we talked about this after the interview, if the Pac-12 was still around in a couple of years, they ought to sign him up at least, part-time. I know he's got his the whole fire gig, but he's such a fantastic analyst. They'd be lucky to have him. But I was also thinking about the fact that, he's the kind of access that he has and the alumni have. I don't know if they were, first of all, bringing back guys like Brian Billick and Bill Belichick is massive, but beyond that, allowing the alumni to, talk to them and just have that kind of access. I don't know if, certainly Jedd Fisch's predecessor didn't do that. And I think that Jedd Fisch gets it. He embraces alumni. It's evidenced by the fact that the Gronkowski brothers are coming back to coach the spring game. He embraces it in a way that few guys have, and he combining that with his NFL connections is fantastic. But no, Barrett's a great wealth of information. He gets the game. He loves Arizona football. He gave a very diplomatic answer about the Pac-12, Big 12 thing, which I enjoyed. But yeah, we'll have him on again definitely before the season starts and during the season to give us some solid analysis.
So I just want to make a quick reference to softball. They got swept at Stanford last week. Now they have 3 games against number 2 UCLA at home. They are not ranked in the top 25, which honestly is an embarrassment. Now, this is their last really tough series of the regular season, but things aren't great. But hey, baseball won 3 of their last 4. They won 3 in a row. Yeah. Lost the first one to Washington, then won the next 2, and then beat New Mexico State on Tuesday night. Now they're going to the Pullman to take on Washington State for 3 games before playing ASU at home for a game.
So is Chip Hale back in your good graces at all, or no? No,
not good.
I will say with the softball team, they've lost. It wasn't like last year. They're losing a lot of close games.
It doesn't matter.
I know it doesn't. I know it doesn't. But they have they have some very talented freshmen. I think that this is a team that maybe is one stud pitcher away from being not top 10 team, but certainly a top 20 team. So I am giving, like Chip, I know you disagree with me. I'm going to give Caitlin Lowe a little more time because I think she's going to do very well.
At least she's recruiting, unlike Chip. I mean,
unlike some people.
I know. Well, yeah. I mean, hey. All right. So the other schedule news that I wanted to talk about this week was announced on Wednesday that Arizona is going to play Michigan State in a non-conference game on Thanksgiving in Palm Springs. I mean, you look at the Wildcats schedule. They have Duke 10 days into the season at
Yep.
Duke.
Yep.
They have Michigan State in Palm Springs in late November. And then in late December, you're going to have Alabama in Phoenix. I don't care that they're not playing in a preseason tournament. You can't find many teams in the country that have 3 non-conference games as intriguing as Arizona has lined up next season.
Telling you, it reminds me of the way Lute Olson used to schedule the non-conference, and Sean Miller, I think, sort of preferred to ease the team into the season a little bit more. I mean, he scheduled some tough teams as well. Don't get me wrong. The home and home with Florida, going to Michigan, but there were a lot more cupcakes than there were during the Lute Olson era. And I think Tommy Lloyd sort of getting back to, and I don't know how much he has to do with it, but just getting back to those tough non-conference games, which are going to look good. There's no reason not to play those games. They look great if you win them. Certainly that's the reason. I know what happened in the tournament, but the reason Arizona got a 2 seed was because of all their impressive non-conference wins, and then a couple over UCLA as well. And if you lose them, it's not going to hurt you. It's not. It's going to toughen you up, and it's going to get you ready for conference play. And so I love it. Tom Izzo is one of the best coaches in the country. He's one of the best tournament coaches, I think, as well. And I kind of feel bad the guys aren't. It's the second straight year they're not going to be home for Thanksgiving, because I think they were in Maui last year. But Maui's not a horrible place to spend.
Yeah, but it's a day game, and then they'll be able to get home. It's in Palm Springs, so they're actually going to be able to get home for Thanksgiving dinner.
True. Have a late dinner. That's good.
Yeah. So no problem there. I'm more concerned about actually having the Duke game within the first 10 days of the season, as I believe it's scheduled. I mean, this Duke team should be really good, like top 3 good. On the road that early in the season without much warm up, that's going to be a tough spot, regardless of what Arizona gets.
I agree. But if it happens, I don't think a big butt kicking early in the season is going to be that big a deal. If anything, they'll learn from it. And so I'm fine with it. And look, remember, if they lose by 20 or 30 in Cameron, we got them in Tucson the following season.
And I can't wait for that. But yeah, I think the key is next year with these 3 games, you got to take 2 out of 3 of them. If you take 2 out of 3, it's a very successful non-conference season. You go 1 out of 3, okay, fine. You go 0-3, you got problems heading into the Pac-12 season. The last with UCLA and USC, and I don't believe that UCLA is scheduled to play at McKale Center, which is incredibly stupid. It wouldn't bother me if a non-conference game or something was added. I don't know how that's going to work.
But to your point, Eric, the fact that they're only playing UCLA once and USC once and during the regular season play, at least next season, makes those non-conference games even more important, because how many chances for quality wins they're going to get in the Pac-12 outside of that.
And by the way, UCLA's lost a lot. Tiger Campbell's gone. Amari Bailey's gone.
They had a big commitment.
But not yet. But they're getting. Not that I've seen. There's a European kid that they're talking about getting. I don't know if it's done yet, but UCLA is not going to be. They thought they were going to get Reese Dixon Waters from USC, and then he ended up going last minute to San Diego State. UCLA fans, I've been perusing their message boards. They are not doing well. Do you think, as an Arizona fan, that we haven't gotten anybody yet that's transferred here yet? UCLA fans are in full panic mode. And I know, Shane, based on your mentions on Twitter, I'm sure you're not devastated to hear that.
No, I love needling a couple of fan bases, UCLA and New Mexico State. Just because they have the big rivalry GCU, and I like taking pot shots at them because they take themselves way too seriously. UCLA fans, some of them anyway, take themselves way too seriously. So I'll just throw something out there and just mute the conversation and just let whatever happens going to happen.
All right, last question for you. It's the NBA playoffs coming up now. I know this is a college sports show, but I still have to ask: will DeAndre Ayton get a ring this year with the Suns?
No, because the Suns are never going to win an NBA championship
stop with
ever.
That. Don't give me that.
I've been a fan since the late 80s, Eric, and I have closed my heart off to this team until they give me reason for hope again, which they will, and my gullibility will buy into it. But putting that aside, putting my bitterness as a lifelong Suns fan aside, I think that health permitting, which is always the big thing, especially with Kevin Durant and Chris Paul, they actually have a better chance of winning it all next year if they get. I mean, those guys are all coming back, and then they'll actually have more than 7 or 8 games to play with each other. But it's just such a gauntlet this year, and without building that chemistry, you got The Clippers won't be easy, and then likely Denver, and then probably the Warriors in the conference finals. I know, by the way, if you get past them, you got the final boss in either Boston or Milwaukee, one of the two best teams in the NBA, most likely. So I think it's going to be a little too big a hill to climb this time.
Will they make the finals?
I'm going to say they get tripped up along the way somewhere. And the other thing is, injuries are always an issue. You know, game one, Durant gets hurt, then all bets are off. And it's a war of attrition. And Durant hasn't played more than 50 games in the last 3 or 4 seasons. So I don't think so, but who knows? We'll see. They'll probably give me false hope again at some point.
I'll say Bucks over Suns in the finals. Sorry, DeAndre, you won't get your ring this year, but hey, at least he's still in the Suns. That we wouldn't have predicted last year this time. I want to thank Barrett Baker for joining us. Great to catch up with him again. Next week, Chris Gronkowski on the show to recap the spring game and hear everything that happens in Tucson this weekend. If you're heading down to the spring game, which I hope you do, have a great time down there, and give us your thoughts on Twitter. So for Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening. And as always, bear down.